why you should read Lord of the Rings. I'm doing more why you should reads on the channel if you want to know why. Watch my why you should read for The Burning. But yeah, another why you should read. So that's right here coming up. Righty, so Lord of the Rings is obviously pretty famous, and if you haven't read the books, you've probably at least watched the movies. And if you haven't watched the movies, you've probably at least heard about it and know what it's about. That's not what I'm here for. You probably know. I'm just telling you why, because especially for avid movie fans, like why this is important for you to read. The first reason is basically just it is what is your starting point. A lot of people say, oh, this is a blueprint, so this is not actually good content, but I very much disagree with it. It's not bad just because it's telling people what to do, because this is basically inventing fantasy for people. Like, it made fantasy what it is today. If you want to know what fantasy was like before this, it wasn't that amazing. It was seen as childish, like The Hobbit, which he did originally. I mean, it was a great book. Don't get me wrong. Great. It was doing exactly what the things people were doing in his time period. And what I love about Lord of the Rings is it changes everything. How many times, has something just like a book? It's kind of like Stormlight Archive. I feel like Stormlight Archive, they brought it, when he wrote Brandon Moore this, he wrote it as something that all publishers would not like. Anything that he was told not to do, he would do in that book. Made it so great. This is crazy because they made this amazing, and I'm really, really appreciative of this series. So I'm just so happy that this happened. Obviously, this was way before my time, but I'm still going to appreciate it for what it is because it is great. Another reason is basically it is 1,000 pages around, but it is some dense stuff, and it's a little hard to read. At some points, it is hard to read. I'm not going to just say, oh no, it's the easiest thing to read, you should definitely read it. It's hard to read, but it's not, but it is for everyone. It is one series that I'm going to tell people to read and they will like it, no matter what. It's like, there's no taste to it, it's just good because it's so all around brilliant. And I feel like Jordan felt like he had more room to work with 14 books. But this thing said it. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure all fantasy authors have read this book series and loved it. So I feel like it's very dense. It's just, that's how you want to do it. Another reason is for writers, this is what you gotta read. Like, again, in my last point, I'm pretty sure every writer ever has read The Lord of the Rings. Or at least fantasy writer. And they know how good it is because this is the blueprint. And I mentioned it's not just a blueprint, but this is also this is modern fantasy all right here. This is modern fantasy. These that made it fantasy. This is, if you read modern fantasy whatsoever, this is what made it happen right here. And I feel like people oh, I don't really need to read it. It's not great, but it is everything like that. The reason is because the movies are good. Again, I love the movies. There's something that's not captured in them. And that's just like how wholesome it is. On Epic Tales, this last tag he did, he mentioned that the books were more about or the movies were more about war and let's fight and there's more trying to be cool, which I admit they were great. The movies did a great job of that. The books were more focused on just being wholesome, having an adventure, being epic on 100% scale while just having so close to these characters. And yeah, it's a great book, and it's really, really nice to have. Another reason would be the prose. Now, I'm not a big prose guy. I don't really mind. I don't really notice a lot of prose. I will mention them in my reviews, but I don't really notice as much. It doesn't bother me or not bother me. But it is crazy. I can tell in this book. It is hard for about the first half of Fellowship of the Ring. And then you get, hey, this is it. This is good. The prose are so beautiful. It's like some of his it's poetry. and it feels like really hardcore literature while being just kind of an epic fantasy. Like, Robert Jordan has criticisms for his prose. Again, I don't really mind it. And Brandon Sanderson basically has none. Like, this is one of the only authors who have basically, like, beautiful literature as prose. I know there's more. Please don't, like, attack me, but there is more. But I think has one of the most beautiful I've ever read. And I feel like even, like, the song, like, he'll have songs in the middle of the book, like, just, like, stop for a song, and I find those cool. I did not read them while I was reading through, but I have been, like, looking back on them and finding them, like, that was cool. I really, really liked that. Another reason is basically because characters are pretty killer. Like, Frodo Baggins and Sam was one of, like, the best friendships I've ever read, and it still marks up to this day. Like, that's crazy. Like, a story like that I read in, like, first grade for the first time, and I'm still reading here, having read most of The Wheel of Time, having read Stormlight, having read Burning, having read so many more series, but this is still up there. It's still up there with friendships, and I'm glad. This is really, really, really cool. Like, maybe Adolin and Kaladin come close, maybe Egwene and Elaine, I don't know, but still, it hasn't passed Sam. It's so cool, like, it is the Lord of the Rings, and that it in itself is crazy. My last point, it is, even though it is an adult book, literally for everyone. I would say, if you can read, and you're at the point where you're reading normal books, like, not like books, like looked down on, you can read Lord of the Rings, especially, like, in audio form or format or something like that. Lord of the Rings, give it a go. I would say I read it in, like, second grade or third grade, and I really enjoyed it because I listened to an audiobook, like, 30 minutes before my bedtime when I was in third grade, maybe, like, 8 years old, and I enjoyed it a lot. Like, I read the book before I watched the movies. Happy to say that. And yeah, everything about it was great, and I just had a great experience reading it. Alright, hopefully I convinced you to read The Lord of the Rings by now. And if you haven't, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you doing? That's the next thing. Like, people want to read all these big series. I'm saying Lord of the Rings, I think it should come first, in my opinion. But, yep, that was my talk. I realize I haven't talked about Lord of the Rings enough on this channel. That is something that will be happening. I will be covering the show when it comes out. And I'm super pumped. So, see you guys in the next video.